You've probably heard a lot about homeschooling lately. It seems like it's gone from this kind of niche choice to a really big part of the conversation about education. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through all the noise and give you a really clear look at what it is, how it actually works, and what it all means for students. Okay, let's just dive right in, because the numbers, wow, they tell a pretty dramatic story. Think about it. Back in 1999, not even 2% of students were homeschooled. By 2012, that number had doubled. But then look at that incredible leap by 2020, over 11%. That's not just some random blip. It points to some really deep shifts in our society. Things like a bigger search for personalized education, more parental involvement, and just changing family dynamics. So you see a jump like that and you've got to ask, right? What's really going on here? What's motivating so many families to make this huge change? And maybe the bigger question, what are the nuts and bolts of how you even do it? Let's break it all down. All right. First things first, we need to get on the same page about what homeschooling actually is, and just as important, what it isn't. This is kind of the foundation for everything we're going to talk about. At its absolute core, homeschooling is all about parental direction. Basically, instead of a school being in the driver's seat, the parent is. They're the ones creating a personalized plan for their kids' education. And that can look like, well, almost anything. It could be kitchen table lessons, sure, but it could also mean joining co-ops, hiring tutors, even taking classes at a local college. The two big takeaways here, parent-directed and personalized. And this quote, this really brings that definition to life, you know? It gets at a huge point that a lot of people miss. Formal schoolwork often takes way less time than you'd think. When you've got that one-on-one focus, things are just more efficient. And that leaves all this extra time for, well, for living. Playdates, museums, sports, all that stuff becomes part of the learning. So why are people doing this? You might think it's all about academics or religion, right? But the answer might actually surprise you. The number one reason, and this is from the National Center for Education Statistics, is actually concern about the school environment itself. We're talking safety, drugs, peer pressure. That's the biggest piece of the pie at 34%. Then you get into things like being unhappy with the academics or wanting to provide religious instruction. Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. Now for the big one, the how. If someone decides to do this, what are the actual first steps they need to take? Well, it really boils down to 4 key steps. Number 1, and this is the biggie, research your state's laws. You absolutely have to know the rules where you live. Step 2, you'll probably have to let your local school district know what you're doing. Then step 3, this is the fun part. You get to explore and pick a curriculum. And last but not least, and trust me, experienced homeschoolers will tell you this is crucial, find a local community. That support is a game changer. And look, when we say research your state's laws, we really mean it. The difference from one state to another can be just massive. Some states are super chill about it, very hands-off, but others, you're going to be jumping through some serious hoops. Things like sending in a notice of intent, keeping attendance records, maybe even doing annual tests or formally naming your school. It truly is all over the map. So here's the bottom line, the most important thing to remember. It's legal in all 50 states, yes, but there's no national rule book. It's all regulated at the state level. The state you live in calls all the shots. That's why your absolute non-negotiable first thing you do step is to check your local laws. Okay, so you've got all the legal stuff figured out. Great, but what does a typical day actually look like? Let's be real, this is where a lot of the myths come from. So let's bust a few. And this is probably the biggest misconception of all. The expectation is that you're just going to recreate school but at your kitchen table, right? Bells ringing, a strict 8 to 5 schedule, the whole 9 yards. But the reality? It's usually so much more flexible. Learning happens everywhere, at the grocery store, on a hike. The schedule bends around your kids' interests and energy. If they suddenly get obsessed with astronomy, you can just lean into it. I mean, listen to this quote from a parent. It just perfectly captures the power of that flexibility. They say one of their kids is a year ahead in math, but a year behind in language arts. In a regular school, that kid might be bored stiff in one class and totally struggling in another. But at home, they can just fly ahead where they're strong and take all the time they need to master what's tough for them. It's not about what grade you're supposed to be in, it's about learning at your own pace. So how do you make that mental shift from school at home to, well, just learning? A lot of veteran homeschoolers talk about this really interesting idea called deschooling. And no, it doesn't mean you do nothing. It's more like a reset button, a transition period for everyone, parents and kids, to kind of detox from that rigid school mindset. It's about getting all those school defaults out of your head so a more natural, curiosity-driven way of learning can take hold.
Okay, but let's be honest. This is a huge decision, and it's definitely not for everyone. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. So let's get real and take a balanced look at the pros and the cons. Think of it like a balance sheet. On the pro side, you've got total flexibility. I mean, you control the schedule, the pace, the curriculum, everything. And you get these incredible opportunities to build stronger family relationships. But on the cons side, well, it's a massive time commitment. You are 100% responsible for your child's education. The buck stops with you. All the costs are on you, and for most families, it's a huge lifestyle change. It's really that classic with great power comes great responsibility situation. So, after weighing all of that, you get to what is probably the million-dollar question for most people. What happens after? What does life after homeschooling actually look like?
And this is where the big anxieties kick in, right? These are the questions that keep parents up at night. Can my kid get a real diploma? Will colleges even look at their application? Are they going to be ready for a job or the military? And these are totally valid concerns. So let's tackle them head on.
All right, here's the secret that a lot of people don't know. When it comes to life after homeschooling, the transcript is king, not the diploma. The parent creates an official transcript. It documents all the courses, the books they used, the grades they got, and that's the document that matters. And colleges, employers, the military, they're all used to this. From your local state school all the way up to the Ivy League, they have systems in place to look at these transcripts and evaluate homeschool graduates. And of course, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the number one question everyone always asks. But what about socialization? It's a fair question, but the data on this might completely surprise you. Get this, a big analysis of peer-reviewed studies found that 78%, that's a huge number, show that homeschooled kids actually score higher on things like social, emotional, and psychological development. Kind of flips the whole stereotype on its head, doesn't it? So all this really leaves us with one final big idea to chew on. We tend to think of school as this place that's supposed to prepare you for life. It's like a simulation of the real world. But homeschooling kind of flips that script. It challenges that whole idea that learning and living have to be separate things. And it leaves you with a really powerful question. If school is meant to prepare you for life, what happens when life is the school?